It's the heavenly light of revival. It's coming from the cemetery. What's the meaning of this? It's shining directly over the place where Janus is buried, eh? Now I understand it. The enemy is going to bring him back to life in an attempt to bring about my downfall by making me confront my own son in a test of his heavenly powers against the black powers given to me by Satan. I must stop it!
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we are talking about Dracula, Sovereign of the Damned from 1980. Definitely not a feature film, was made for TV.
Right.
And I did promise on our very first episode we wouldn't be doing much animation or direct-to-video or stuff, and the last 6 episodes, I think we've done 3 cartoons.
Some of them had feature, some of them were released in cinemas.
Yes.
This one, absolutely not.
No, definitely not. Okay, so pause the podcast.
No, there's no spoilers. You can't spoil this film.
No, you can't spoil it unless...
Because everything happens in it.
Everything happens. Wow. The comics, I really don't know what to say about Pause the Podcast. If you're not aware that Dracula eats hamburgers in this movie, it's a very common meme that you see all over the internet. If you're not aware of that, I'm sorry we spoiled it for you already.
Yeah.
But if you want to see that, maybe pause the podcast and go see it.
Go watch.
Or, read the comics. So the comics are kind of in the mid-range. We'll talk about which comics we're covering, but anyway, right. I don't think we need to pause the podcast. Nope. Okay, so I want to start right off with a correction.
Oh.
So it's good that we're doing 2 in a row, because I can actually do a correction. Last week I said that when Jim Shooter canceled the series an issue early, that was the straw that broke Marv Wolfman's back and he quit and left for DC. But actually, Tomb of Dracula continued as a magazine format for 6 issues. It was relaunched as a magazine, and Marv Wolfman was writing those.
Okay.
Gene Colan was not drawing all of them. There was like a range of different artists, including there's a Steve Ditko issue in there and stuff. So it's all sorts of interesting stuff, but it wasn't quite enough to launch Teen Titans.
Right. It was perhaps the penultimate straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes. And also I have a correction about the movie, which is, I kept saying last week that the dub was by Streamline, so I want to apologize to Streamline. It was not Streamline, it was Harmony Gold.
Harmony Gold. Please
don't sue us, because we're still dealing with the Madonna lawsuit for defamation. So, it's Harmony Gold who... I don't know why it's a Streamline, because Harmony Gold, of course, brought over Robotech to the U.S., so they have a certain reputation for fiddling with translations and stuff like that, and we'll talk about all of that.
Brilliant.
So, let's give a little bit of an overview of what happens in Tomb of Dracula, the comics.
Yes.
So, first I want to say it's by Marv Wolfman, Gene Colan, inked by Tom Palmer, who I didn't mention last week, which was a shame because obviously the inking is part of the whole package. That lovely feathering and the shadows and everything is really great. So we've got this guy named Frank Drake, who's American, and he in the first issue he goes to Transylvania because he's inherited his family castle.
Yeah,
Castle
he's a bit of a wastrel.
Yeah,
a rake. He's spent his fortune. All he has left is this mouldy castle.
Yes,
in Transylvania,
and
which, as it happens, is Count Dracula's castle.
Count Dracula's castle. He goes there with his girlfriend,
fiance,
and a pal, and the pal is a dum-dum that finds Dracula's grave. He finds a tomb, and he pulls the stake out, and now we get 70 issues of Dracula running around like crazy because of this one dude. I don't know why he pulled that stake out.
Running around and ranting.
And he gets bit.
Well, he doesn't believe in Dracula.
He becomes a thrall of Dracula, and the fiance gets killed.
She gets turned first, then killed.
They turn and kill people all the time, as we mentioned last week in the series.
It's awesome.
Yeah. You think this character's going to be around? No, they're going to get turned and killed. And so he ends up in a group of vampire hunters, which we also mentioned last week. So one of them is Quincy Harker,
Yes.
who is the son of
or perhaps
Jonathan.
Grandson of...
No, I think
you're right,
he's
it's
the
the
son.
It's the son.
And he was named after Quincy P. Morris, the Rocketeer himself. And then the other one is Rachel Van Helsing.
Yes, that's right. She's the granddaughter
She's the
of
granddaughter
Abraham Van Helsing.
Van Helsing. And
Blade the Vampire
Blade
Hunter.
the Vampire Slayer or Hunter. And later on, there's this dude named Harold, who I have to
Harold H. Harold.
Harold, he's this bucktooth nerd who's writing for occult magazines and writing a vampire novel.
Yeah.
But I have to assume from that name he was named after Humbert from Lolita for some reason.
Oh my god, that didn't even occur to me.
It's very strange to name a character Harold.
Harold H. Harold.
Yeah. Okay, so who was there another vampire hunter that I'm forgetting about?
Hannibal King, I think, joins them in the end.
Yes, so he comes in around issue 60, I'm going to say, or 54, somewhere in there.
And he's one of the earliest vampire that goes good and solves crime.
He's a PI.
He's a PI.
He's a PI, yeah.
Which apparently is quite the archetype, which I didn't know.
I didn't know that either.
But there's quite a bit of urban fantasy
Vampire PIs?
about vampire PIs or
Okay.
vampire cops.
Okay. And who else was the... Oh, yeah, Quincy Harker's in a wheelchair, which is tricked out with all sorts of gadgets and stuff. It's like a James Bond wheelchair. And his daughter and his wife are both killed by vampires. I think probably turned and killed is my guess.
Yeah. His daughter's killed by Dracula himself in an early issue.
Yes.
As you mentioned, she just gets randomly turned and killed. He has to kill her, in point of fact.
Yes.
He has to stake
That's
her
what
himself.
always happens. They get turned and they have to kill them.
Yes.
And his wife is killed. Both of Van Helsing's parents have been killed. Now, okay, so now we're getting into the later issues. Around issue 45, we get this thing where Dracula decides... I don't know if you read this one. Okay, so Dracula decides he needs to be more proactive. So he decides he's going to hijack a cult. So he consults with Harold, who he just consults with, I guess, sometimes. Yeah.
He calls him Manling.
Yes, Manling.
And he just sort of... he's his go-to guy, or one of his go-to
He's
guys.
like, what are the cults in town? And he's like, I'm looking for Satanists. And he's like, Harold's like, okay.
Satanists? Whoa, that's a heavy bag.
Yep.
Lucky I have my notes
he directs him to some Satanists, and Satanists are about to sacrifice this girl named Domini, and she's crucified upside down, and they're going through this ritual. It's wild. And they're about to sacrifice
her. They light her on fire, but the fire doesn't burn her.
Because of all the spells they've done or whatever, and she's unharmed. And Dracula's watching at the window for his moment, and they think they're summoning Satan, as he's referred to, but... Dracula flies in at the exact moment. He's like, aha, I'm here. I'm your lord and master. And they're like, well, take this woman as your bride. Do with her as you please. She was going to be sacrificed to live in hell with Satan was the plan.
Yeah.
Even though she wasn't burning alive, I don't know how she was going to be killed. Anyway. So Dracula ends up marrying her.
Yep.
And then in between there, they cast a magic spell so she gets pregnant.
Yes.
And she has, issue 54, she has a baby named Janus.
Yeah.
And Janus, but meanwhile, the head guy in the cult, whose name was Anton he had a Polish name or something. Lebreski. It doesn't sound like Anton LaVey. It's not like that. It's very Polish sounding or something.
It's Lewinsky or something like that, isn't it?
Lepetsky or something like that.
Yeah.
Anton Lepetsky or something. Anyway, he has figured out that Dracula's scamming them. So he's like, I want to kill this guy. So he teams up with the vampire hunters.
Yeah.
And he's like, we both have the same goal. We want to kill Dracula. And they're like, well, you're a Satanist, and we're not so sure about you. But
There's a great line where they're talking about how they don't trust him.
Yeah.
We've been wanting to kill Dracula for ages, but this just feels really sleazy. And he goes, what, is it because I'm a Satanist?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to freedom of religion?
He says that more than once. He brings up freedom of religion in different issues. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was like, yeah, and he says it's not against the law to be a Satanist. Unlike being a vampire,
Well, it's not against the law to be a vampire
there's no
either.
law against it. But the way he phrased it was like it's illegal to be a vampire, but there's no law.
It's not a
against
crime to murder a vampire because they're already dead.
Yeah.
That comes up in the film amazingly.
Yeah, so they had this confrontation on the one, it's Janus's first birthday. They've had this big feast, and there's a big confrontation, and Lepetsky, or whatever his name is, shoots at Dracula. Dracula turns into mist to avoid the bullet, but the bullet goes past him and kills Janus the baby. So around 60...
I think he's re-solidifying after having already been missed.
Okay, right.
And
okay.
he's still intangible enough for the bullet to pass through
Right.
and hit Janus.
Okay, and so then this is all around issue 60, 61. So then Janus is resurrected by Dominique. She casts another spell, and she brings this character that I met before called the Golden Angel, and merges... We're into real Marvel Comics territory here, because issue 60, you're 5 years in, you're like, holy shit.
Wacky.
We've had 60 stories.
I think in issue 45, which you told me, Dracula's talking about how he fought the Silver Surfer a couple of issues earlier.
Yes, and Doctor Strange shows up. Doctor Strange thinks he's killed him, and he in Doctor Strange 14, he's killed Dracula, and in Time with Dracula, he wakes up again. He's like, I tricked Doctor Strange, and I fought the Silver Surfer, and
That's hilarious.
all this stuff's going on. So they resurrect Janus, and now Janus is, instead of being a 1-year-old baby, is now like this grown angel dude, this white angel dude. Okay, and then we skipped ahead, and we read the last 3 issues of the series, in which Dracula has been stripped of his powers.
And has become a mortal man once more.
Yes, he's become immortal. He is hounded by, other undead. Now, they're following a new leader whose name is...
Torgo.
Torgo. Isn't that the name of the guy in Manos, the Hands of Fate?
Oh, it is.
Is it Torgo?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's called Torgo. That's fantastic.
Okay, so they're following this new Lord of Vampires, so they're all piling on him, and it seems like Lord of the Vampires is not just a title in this universe. It's not just like the guy who's most respected, so they follow him. You actually get a special set of powers.
Yeah.
And that set of powers is assigned to you as Lord of the Damned or Lord of...
And you compel the obedience of all vampires, and all undead, really, as the Lord of vampires.
Yeah. So...
There's some great... It really has been ratcheting up over time. It's building and building and building.
Oh yeah, there's all these characters now. You jump to issue 69 or 70 and you're like, who are all these people? We got the wife, we got Torgo, we've got the son, Janus, who's like, at this stage, he just shows up and gives Dracula advice, like... You want your powers back, they will come to you. He's like a prophet. He just shows up and disappears.
That is exactly what he's like.
Your powers will come back to you, that kind of thing.
Go to Transylvania.
Yes.
Meet your destiny.
Yes, meet your destiny, exactly. So...
It's really heavy. Like, Dracula is he's always been a bit mournful, but also a bit gleeful. So he's always ranting and raving. Like, he rants constantly in this amazing purple prose, which I really like. Accursed foes! You dare raise a hand against the Lord of the Undead? It's great stuff. Just over and over, panel after panel after panel. As I said last week, it's actually lampshaded in dialogue by other characters to say, oh, Dracula is ranting and raving again.
Yes.
But and it's getting really heavy. He's getting really morose, really kind of thinking and thoughtful. He's really pensive and thinking about who is he?
Yep.
What who are these? He starts to wonder if he really wants to be Lord of the Undead anymore.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's heavy stuff. There's a lot of references to God and stuff. He eventually he's compelled by the vampires hounding him to forsake Satan and call on God.
Yes.
Which he does.
Yes.
And even though he's forsaking Satan, even though he and Satan are very definitely enemies at the time, because Satan personally stripped him.
Satan shows up, he's this big red dude. He actually shows up as a character.
Yeah, he's rampaging around a city. He's like knocking down buildings in issue 69 or whatever it is. Yeah. And then they all... So he does this, and then they all laugh and cheer and celebrate, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to corner him, and they wanted him to renounce Satan and call upon God as his savior. It's bizarre. It's so nuts, but it's good. It doesn't. Of course, it's crazy and over the top. Yeah. But it's been building. Yes. It builds over page over page over page, almost to a kind of... It really ratchets up the tension. Is excruciating after a while. Yeah.
Because it's really these last 3 issues or so. This thing is ongoing. So Torgo has a plan to breed humans like cattle. This is his what he wants to do.
Torgo is yes.
And Dracula accuses him, says viciousness is not a quality for leadership. I'm like, are you sure, Dracula? Because I'm sure that's what you've been doing for 68 issues. Yeah. So he Dracula challenges Torgo to a duel.
Yep.
Apparently this is in the rules. You can just call it a duel. So they're chained together by the wrist, and they're supposed to fight with stakes.
He's recovered his powers at this point, hasn't he?
Yeah, how did he get his powers? I'm trying to remember.
They're just sort of given back to him at some point.
You know what? Satan shows up. He plays this trick on him. He plays a trick that he's being attacked by the hunters, and he sees the graves of all the people he's murdered. Like, he stumbles into this area, and then Satan just gives him his
just randomly gives him back, because it's all about humiliating him or
something like that. There's some convoluted...
It gives him back his powers, and then he's pursued by all of the undead again. Yeah. He goes and hides in a hut with some children.
He hides with these kids. He's being hounded by the bats and vampires outside. They can't enter. And he actually grabs a cross, which is like burning his hand.
Yep.
And he kind of chases these things away, and he's protecting the kids.
Yeah.
The kid's mother has gone away and said, don't let any strangers in the house, but they saw this man being hounded by the bats, and they let him in.
So he's undergoing a change of heart, and it's pretty gradual. I like the way it's handled.
Yeah.
Slowly, over page, he's getting more and more doubts. He's feeling more and more different.
Yeah.
And even once he's got his powers back, he's still doing uncharacteristically generous things, like defending these children, grabbing a cross and using it to fend off vampires.
Yeah.
To save the kids.
Yeah.
He says to him, what does he say? He yells at him, use your crucifixes, save yourselves, believe in your God, he is your only salvation now.
Yes. So he...
then the big fight with Torgo.
Yes, and there's the fight with Torgo. Finally, he beats Torgo. I don't remember exactly how, but Torgo just turns to ash, and then all the vampires are worshipping.
Yeah.
Now, Dracula's Lord of the Vampires again.
But it's galling to him. It's bitter ash in his mouth, and he says, did I rule toads such as this? Were these vermin the army?
Which is what he felt before he became Lord again. He was sick of them already.
Yeah. But now that he is Lord again,
they think he's filth because he's married like a human and stuff. Or they had thought that before he became Lord of the Vampires again. Again, I guess the duel magically conferred the powers back on him. Anyway.
It's like Highland. There can be only one.
Yes. So he goes back to Castle Dracula. He goes up to the tower, and Quincy Harker is there waiting for him. How did Quincy get up there in his wheelchair? Well, no help. None of the other hunters are there, so they didn't help.
That's a damn good point. Well, perhaps he dragged his own wheelchair up there because he gets out of the wheelchair. It's fine it's handled okay in the comic.
So he got put in the wheelchair by Dracula somehow, we learn. There's a line of dialogue.
Before the comics, he personally
some backstory,
crippled Quincy Harker.
But so he gets out of the chair. Okay, I'm okay, so he's going to stand this one time in his life for like a minute. Okay, but he still got up to the tower somehow with no help. And he says he's tricked out his wheelchair so that he can pull the spokes out and they're silver, and he stabs Dracula and he's like, now I'm going to sever your head and stuff it with garlic so you can never come back. And then his wheelchair, which is tricked to explode, explodes and destroys a tower. Yeah. So he didn't sever the head or stuff the garlic in it. He said he was going to do it.
Yeah, but he ran out of time.
Did he run out of time, or
he did say that, but it was always his plan to bury himself and Dracula underneath the rubble of Castle Dracula. Because
but he hasn't done the thing that will keep him dead, and he said he would. So
Dracula can. I mean, it's pretty. I'd say it's done so that Dracula can make a comeback.
Yes, but he shouldn't have said that stupid stuff about.
I agree.
Doing that stuff and then not doing it and not timing his wheelchair to explode 10 seconds later so he could do these things, or...
Yeah, so Quincy it turns out he's not in good health, unsurprisingly. He's in a wheelchair and he's old, but he has cancer or something.
Yes, this is a cliche we've seen in other...
cliche. He doesn't need to be dying of cancer. He's an old guy that's been hunting Dracula his whole life.
I'm trying to remember where else we've seen this. It's in like Gran Torino and other things where the old guy is sick.
Yeah.
Oh, even Abraham Whistler in Blade had cancer, and then was kind of sacrificed
to make us feel better about when they die. Maybe
I don't know. Yeah.
In this case, it's an excuse for him to get him away from the other vampire hunters.
Yes.
Because he writes them a letter for them to read afterwards. Yes. He says, "This is something I have to do. I can do it because I'm dying. I'm going to go up to the tower, I'm going to stake Dracula, and then I'm going to blow up and go out in a blaze of glory, and we'll both be buried under 100 feet of rubble, and he's never coming back. And that's basically what happens.
Yeah. So the tower goes down, the other hunters, Rachel and Frank run out, and then the villagers are like celebrating because they're like free of evil. I'm like, well, how did they know how did they know Dracula was up in the tower when it fell? How did they know that killed him? And then we get this, Frank is like, they're sad. They realize that he's killed him. They realize that Quincy's killed himself. Yeah. And Frank says he lived a long, happy life. He died doing what he wanted. Was his life long and happy? His wife and daughter were killed, and he spent his entire life in a wheelchair because of Dracula, and spent his whole life hunting Dracula. I guess he did die doing what he wanted, but
he did doing what he loved, which was staking vampires. He died doing what he loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, Marv Wolfman is laying it on really thick.
Well, I think part of the problem here is that this was supposed to be 2 issues. It's a double-sized issue. It was supposed to be 2. He had to cut a bunch of pages and reorder it and use individual panels and try to craft the story. There's stuff that happens in it that never happened in other issues. Like, there's a scene where 3/4 way down the page, we cut to, we got a Dracula scene, then we cut to the vampire hunters for, one panel in a bar talking about something, and it cuts back, and it's like, Gene Colan would never lay out a scene like that. He would wait for the page turn most of the time for something like that.
So it's like you said last week, they've just had to take what they planned and kind of jumble it up. And the pages they're using, it's pretty, I think it's kind of obvious in the way the pages are laid out. Since you pointed it out, I could see it. There's a lot of corners of panels, and it's not the 6 or 9 panel layout. Not that it always did that, but...
Well, I think Gene Colan, when he was quite smart about it, because it usually be just 6 or 9... It was just people talking, but once things started to get more intense, he would start moving things around and have swirly, panel board.
He absolutely did, and it looked fantastic. But in these issues, just when people are talking, we've got the creative panel positioning, like up in the corner, down in the bottom corner, just and I'm reading it thinking, this is really weird. I feel kind of litigious. Why are they talking on an angle?
Yeah, right. The Dutch tilt with no explanation.
But and of course, as you pointed out, to cram 3 issues worth of content into 2 issues, perhaps.
Yeah. There is a panel at the very end, or 2 panels where Frank and Rachel embrace, and it's silence. There's no caption explaining that now Frank and Rachel embrace, which is normally what Marv Wolfman would put in there. And it was actually a brilliant moment of it was like a relief to not have to read anything for 2 panels and just have let Gene do the work, which he can do.
His breathless prose announcing what's going on in every single panel.
But to finally trust Gene to just draw what's happening with no dialogue or anything was really pretty amazing. And that's basically how it ends until Dracula's resurrected very shortly afterwards in his own
6-issue
magazine, and then various other...
That's why he couldn't get
stuff
his head cut off and filled with garlic.
Yes, and then Doctor Strange finally killed him and all vampires, as I mentioned last week in issue 62 of Doctor Strange, until they came back pretty soon afterwards, and then we had a new Tomb of Dracula revival and Blade, etc. And Night Stalkers, which was all the old vampire hunters except for the dead ones. So I guess we can move on to Sovereign of the Damned at this stage?
Yes, we absolutely can. Where do we start with this?
Okay, alright. So where do we start is, we got to start in the early 70s.
Brilliant.
You know what, we got to start with a guy named Gene Pelk. P-E-L-C. Gene was won't go into it too much because you can find interviews and features on YouTube about him and podcasts and stuff, but I'll link to some of that stuff in the show notes. So Gene Pelk was basically a free agent. He went to Japan. He was a radio DJ. He was a New York DJ. He met a Japanese woman, married her, was going back and forth to Japan, and preferred it over there to the U.S., and was like, well, how can I make a job for myself? And he noticed that there were no Marvel comics in Japan. Now, this is mid-70s. Now, early 70s, Marvel had made a stab. They had a Spider-Man comic and a Hulk comic in 70-71, but it didn't really go anywhere. And DC had kind of tried a couple of things and just didn't go anywhere. Selling translate. People don't need them in Japan. Japan has enough comics.
Right.
But Pelk was like, this is the biggest market for comics in the world, and there are no Marvels over here. So he cold called Marvel. He was like, can I speak to Stan Lee? And he got on the phone with Stan Lee.
Wow.
And he was like, hey, why don't you let me try to license your stuff in Japan or cut some sort of deal? And if I don't get a deal, it hasn't cost you a cent. And if I do get a deal, you'll make some money off of it. Stanley's okay. You have my blessing. So he goes over to Japan and he starts to cut a deal with. So first he cut a deal to license some more Spider-Man comics, and they were serialized in the Japanese version of Playboy for 6 weeks, and that was 1976. It was to celebrate like the U.S. centenary, or what was it? Would have been 200 years or whatever at that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it was kind of a little.
Yeah.
It was kind of a little cultural thing, but it didn't do anything well. And he was trying to cut deals and just couldn't. And finally he realized... He took it to Toei. Toei was a production company that made TV and animation. Mm-hmm. And he brought them Spider-Man, and they worked out the way to sell it was to put Spider-Man into a giant robot. Now,
yes, that's right. Yes, we've all heard of this.
Yeah, so... What had happened was that there had been this is what is called tokusatsu, which means special effects, is that type of show. And there's another type of show, which is your, what's called your Sentai, which is your fighting team, where you'd have 5 dudes in 5 different colored suits. And he's like, well, we got a guy in a suit, let's put him in a robot. And I don't think they had a robot. There had only been robots in animation. So Spider-Man was the first time they did a robot in live action. This is like actually a critical turning point, because we wouldn't have any of the Power Rangers, all that stuff would not exist without the Spider-Man, that version, because they were about to cancel. They had done 2 shows and they're like, it's not working. And then Gene Pelk came in, he's like, well, let's use this Marvel character in here. So he cut this deal that there was Marvel was allowed to use Toei characters, and Toei could develop Marvel characters. So the second series they did was called Battle Fever J, after Spider-Man, and that was actually kind of supposed to be Avengers.
Brilliant.
They were all the characters were like Battle Japan was like the Captain America, and there was like Miss America was a character, and there was like Battle Kenya and Battle
Kenya?
Yeah, there was like 5, they were from 5 different countries supposedly.
Kenya, though? Wow.
Yeah, I don't know how that...
Interesting.
That happened. So that now we get kind of an explosion, and meanwhile in the U.S., Shogun Warriors was a comic that Marvel published, which was based on all the robots. They just put all the robots together. Part of the thing was Bandai was involved here, and they wanted they were the sponsor. They wanted toys out of it, which is why Spider-Man had a car, which he drove up into his robot. That kind of stuff. Yeah. All that stuff came out of this deal. But also, Gene Pelk set up Marvel Productions, which was the animation studio. He was like, wait a second, they've got better animators in Japan. So he was like, we'll set up the studio in LA. Stan Lee had gone to LA to try to set up TV deals. Yep. And he's like, okay, we'll do the storyboards and the scripts in LA, and animation will be done in Japan. And that's how we ended up with G.I. Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony, Dungeons and Dragons, and all the Marvel shows like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and Hulk. All those early 80s shows came out of that system that Gene Pelk had set up.
All right then.
Gene Pelk also, at this stage, so there was no. He set up this Tomb of Dracula deal.
Yep.
Let's make it. So he was going to make it. This movie was going to be made in Hollywood. It was going to be like the other animation. It was going to be like a Hollywood script and everything, and then the animation we done in Japan. And at some stage, the Hollywood side pulled out of their. They're like, no, we don't want to do it anymore. So he didn't have the budget. So he did the whole thing was done in Japan.
Yes.
Now, there was never a release of the Tomb of Dracula comic book in Japan. It was never released in Japanese.
Yep.
So it's just like,
so who's the market for this movie? Yeah.
I don't know, but it's almost like any. I suppose you could reverse it to any other country. Like, say you send a Black Panther movie to, I don't know, maybe Poland or somewhere, or that they never had a translated comic. Well, maybe not, because I guess they could get English copies. It's not like it was in the 70s and 80s, but it is a very weird choice to be like, this is the one.
Yeah.
And it's like they didn't put any robots in it or anything. No. They didn't shift it around. I was actually shocked when I read this how many plot points came right out of the Marvel. I thought it was because I only knew it by its reputation, and I assumed it was going to be just robots. A bunch of robots, just random Dracula stuff.
The story equivalent of robots, like Dracula was going to get into a flying car or something.
Nah, not even that. I just thought it would have maybe it would have the same characters, but they would just have adventures. You know what I mean? Like it would have the vampire hunters having adventures fighting Dracula.
No, it pretty much every plot point essentially comes from the 70 issues of Tomb of Dracula.
Yes.
In fact, it's more or less an adaptation of the whole kind of story of Tomb of Dracula.
Yeah.
In 90 minutes. 90 minutes. Which is not...
Felt like 7 hours, but it was 90 minutes, and they seemed to cover, like, almost everything from the early issues to the middle issues to the final 3 issues.
Yep.
Scenes which you'd think would be cut were in there, and there was stuff, like, because I read some comics, watched the movie, then went back and read some of the middle comics. I was like, wait a second, what's going on here?
Yep.
And there was stuff in here, like, the movie opens, they're in Boston. I'm like, why are they in Boston? This is so dumb. And then you meet the Satanic Cult, and they're working on a hexagram, and I'm like, it's not a pentagram? That's weird. Then I went back and read the comics, it's all in there. They're in Massachusetts, they're using a hexagram.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, so this stuff was not like just random.
No.
I mean, except for the hamburger eating and maybe some other bits.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's good, though.
No.
This is a big mess.
It is a big mess. I will say right out... Okay, so the director was Minoru Okazaki. The writer was Tadaaki Yamazaki. I don't know their other credits. The soundtrack, which I quite liked, was apparently by the Transylvania Baroque Ensemble.
Oh, wow.
Is what the credit is. In the opening, I googled them, couldn't find any...
I'd be a bit suspicious about
anything. That. Yeah. So, about 10 months ago, after the start of this podcast, this outfit called Kineko Video uploaded a scan of the 16mm print up to YouTube with subtitles.
Yep.
Now, as I said previously, we only... in 1983, a video, I guess, or TV version was released by Harmony Gold,
yes,
which was the dub.
Yeah, it was released on cable.
Okay.
As you say, in 1983, and then on VHS and Betamax.
Right. Okay.
That is exhausted my trivia about this movie, incidentally.
Okay, interesting.
Because there's nothing about it online.
Yeah, there's not much. There's not even... I even went to the Japanese wiki, and there wasn't that much information about it. And you'll notice, like, people never mention Gene Pelk's name with these things, but he was, like, behind the scenes and all this stuff. So, basically, we start with a satanic cult.
I should point out... Sorry, before you go any further...
Yeah.
Kumar and I, in the interest of completion, have each watched a different version of the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
because there are 3 versions on YouTube. One is a VHS rip with subtitles. One is a rip from like the Japanese DVD with the English dub put over it.
Right.
And one is the Kineko Video 16mm scan and subtitle.
Right, so I watched the second of those.
Okay.
The dub.
Okay.
So, recut to conform...
Match the DVD.
Yeah, to match the DVD. And this... oh my god. It is hilarious. You remember, it's a bit like Speed Racer in terms of the way that the dub is performed.
Right.
You have a few more actors than Speed Racer. Voice actors, I assume, but very similar. Some people just kind of really phoning it in a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But also hilarious dialogue. So, and I think in the credits, just one guy was credited as writer and director.
Okay.
I didn't write his name down.
Okay.
But apparently, I guess he wrote, this guy from Harmony Gold,
Was it Carl Masek?
It might well have been. That does sound familiar.
Because he was the guy. He was running the show there, and he did the Robotech. So okay.
So I'll be interested. I'm looking forward to finding out how they... how our 2 versions are going to line up because there's some hilarious dialogue. Okay. Absolutely hilarious.
Well, the first thing I was going to say is that the Satanic Cult...
Oh, okay, but we have to stop. Before the Satanic Cult, we have the beginning. So the beginning is really trippy. It starts out in space.
Yes.
And
about the history of the evil in the universe and...
Right, so that made it in. This is fantastic. The voice actor sounds like a sportscaster.
Yeah, I heard a few minutes of it, yeah.
And he goes, "The awesome struggle of good versus evil. Love against malevolence. Been going on since the history of the universe."
Yeah. Probably miscast, I think, is the word we're looking for there.
I was already laughing.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, we begin with the cult.
So we get this cult called the Black Parish in the subtitles. They are summoning a dude named Satan Lucifer. He's referred to as Satan Lucifer several times. I was a bit like, I can see why the U.S. backers backed out. Because, I mean, there's no way you could sell this to kids. There's actually some gore in here and stuff.
Yeah, it's full on. Dracula is... Dracula is biting people's necks straight up.
Well, there's we
get a close-up of his fangs in the people's necks.
Yeah, so we get the cult. It kind of plays out the same way, but we don't know what's happened. So they're trying to summon Saint Lucifer, but Dracula appears, and they're like, "Here's your bride, Dracula." Yes. And they were not sacrificing this girl. I think he chose out of the crowd.
It comes up later, at least in my...
Yeah, later it's explained why Dracula
He just flies in the window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think he chooses her out of the crowd. This is a nameless
cult in the...
Or I can't remember exactly now how it played.
Well, in the English stuff.
Yeah.
We have the guys hammering the heptagram.
Yes.
Hexagram. And there's like 6 guys. And it reminded me of that scene in Tales from the Crypt, that interminable scene where the blind dudes are hammering together the maze, because it went on for ages. They were just hammering for about 5 minutes. And in this, they're trying to summon Satan, specifically. He's not called Satan Lucifer in the English stuff. Okay. He's Satan, but they give him many names. They call him Satan, they call him Lucifer, they call him Baal, Beelzebub,
we never got that.
Abaddon. Okay. They're just throwing out all these names for demons.
Okay.
But it's pretty clear.
They're trying to make it vague, I guess, deliberately, like, this is some being in the dub.
I mean, it seems pretty clear that they're going for the head honcho, though.
Yeah.
And they mentioned that they're going to sacrifice Dolores.
Okay.
So she's called Dolores in the dub, not Domini.
Okay, well, the sub, she's called Domini in the Japanese.
Ah, well.
They haven't changed the names. Everybody's got the right names.
Yeah, well, here she's Dolores.
Okay.
And they're like saying things like, "Hail Dolores." There's a line, "Hail Dolores, bride of Satan."
Okay.
And then Batman, what is that going to keep happening?
Well, Batman is a Dracula-like character, obviously.
My eyes keep glancing down at my notes where I've written Batmap.
Right. Oh, the Batmap. Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to the Batmap. So, yeah.
Batman Dracula crashes in through the window and arrives.
Yeah.
And he looks into Dolores' eyes.
Yeah.
And they have a moment.
Yeah.
You know. And he picks her up and takes her away. And the cultists are all very happy because Satan has accepted the bride.
Yes.
And then our sports announcer comes in with some narration, which is, "The beautiful Dolores had aroused the unholy desires of Dracula."
This is very Harmony Gold, because there's no more narration after there's some at the beginning and some at the end of the movie, and there's none in between.
Oh, so much fantastic narration all the way through.
So he takes her home, but he can't bring himself to bite her for some reason that he himself doesn't understand. But we get this shot where the camera like tracks down her cleavage and then like back up to her neck as she's in bed.
Yep. Well, I thought that was because he's thinking about biting her.
Yeah, obviously, but then we did definitely get a deliberate cleavage shot before it goes back.
For kids.
And then we get the rose. There's like a close-up of these roses, and there's like all this symbolism of like the blood and
falls
stuff.
Off the rose.
Yep.
And Dracula's sort of shouting about, how can I feel love? Is this love? And then this is what he's saying in the dub. And then he takes off, flies
I don't think he mentions any thoughts of love, but he definitely doesn't know why he can't bite her in the sub. So then he flies off to Boston Airport, where it's very specifically the airport for no reason. Why does it have to be the airport? He attacks this woman at the airport, and we get a title card that tells us it's the airport. I'm like, we don't need to know that. It's not relevant.
Yeah.
So he bites one woman, then he goes to bite another woman. We actually get an attempt at a jump scare where this hobo comes out of the dark at this woman, and I guess a 4-year-old might be freaked out by this moment.
Can we go back to the airport for a moment? Because she's like, someone's flying away. She's like waving away a handkerchief at a plane, and she actually yells out, "Goodbye, Harold!" And then Dracula appears and just straight up murders her.
I thought she was going to be a character, or there was going to be something important was going to happen at the airport.
Who's Harold?
Like somebody important was going to fly in. No,
we never find out who Harold is.
No.
She just gets bitten and turns blue.
So then he goes to this alley. This woman is scared by a hobo. He kills the woman. Now, we get this crazy cut. Sometimes this movie builds up some goodwill, and then it takes it away immediately. So kills this woman in the alley, and then we get a sudden smash cut to funk music, and some guys ogling her on TV. They're like, whoa, like, she's a hot one, like, too bad she's dead. And,
right.
Yeah, so I'm guessing this
that was a bit less pronounced in the song.
Oh, yeah, it's like, boy, it's so sad because she was such a good-looking woman that she's dead.
Oh, that's weird.
And then we get this news report where they're talking to the hobo.
The hobo's hilarious.
It's weird. The weird thing is, you're looking at the corpse and you get this funk music come on. It's so jarring and bizarre.
I'm not sure I had the funk music in mind.
So now...
it's Frank Drake in this bar watching it with his mates.
Frank Drake is one of the ones watching them. So Frank leaves the bar and he's confronted.
He gets a call. Does he get the call?
Oh yes, he gets a phone call in the bar.
Yes.
They're like, meet us in the park. He's like, who's this? Or this female voice, meet us in the park. He goes to the park, and Quincy Harker there in the wheelchair and Rachel Van Helsing, they introduce themselves. They say, we know you're a descendant of Dracula.
Yep, so far so good.
He's like, screw that, I don't really care about hunting vampires.
Yep.
And Harker attacks him.
Yep.
Rachel is pushing his wheelchair as Harker attacks him with
it's a cane
sword. Yeah.
It's so funny. He doesn't step to the side or step off the path or something. He's just backing up while Harker's wildly swinging his cane sword.
And she's got to control this thing while they're fighting.
So funny.
So Frank Drake is like leaping around. He's doing all this kind of kung fu.
He flies at one point.
Yeah, and they're like, well, I think it's badly, and I think the animation, I think it's supposed to be an awesome jump.
That became clear afterwards, but he just sort of flew into the air like someone from a wuxia movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that.
And then I thought, in this he has superpowers as Dracula's descendant. No, he's just a martial artist.
Yeah. Which
he wasn't in the comics. So there's an invention.
So, yes. So, they're like, look, we need you to join us in our fight against Dracula. He's like, I don't care, give me some money. They're like, okay, we'll pay you. Here's your compensation. He wants compensation to fight Dracula.
Yes.
And then he immediately sexually assaults Rachel.
Yep.
He gives her a kiss. She pulls a crossbow on him.
Yep.
Fires like 6 crossbow bolts at him.
Into the cuffs of his flares.
I was like, dude, both of these things are like, okay, the sexual assault was not okay. Also, attacking him with a crossbow was also probably not okay. There's probably an overreaction.
So Quincy offers him a big envelope of money and says, in this envelope is a check for $100,000.
Yeah.
And he's like, forget it, even for $100,000, but maybe if you throw her in.
Yeah.
And then he gives her a kiss.
Yes.
And she slaps him and then starts shooting
crossbow
bolts.
And then starts shooting at him, yeah.
But she's showing off because she's pinning his pants to the floor.
Right.
I guess it's supposed to be cool, but it just looks kind of silly. And and then he spends about 20 seconds pulling them all out.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like the extended cut of hammering the hexagram. We have a 20-second cut of him pulling all 6 of the crossbow bolts out of his pants.
Yes.
Man.
So now we've got, in the comics we had a dog called Saint. Here the dog is called White God, which is a weird name for a brown dog.
He's not called White God in the... he's called Atticus or something. Okay. He's not called Saint, he's not called White God.
So the key thing about White God is he can smell evil because he was raised in a church and drank only holy water.
That's right, that's the same. It's the same in this song. Except he doesn't smell evil, as we'll get to. He smells the absence of evil. Did that come across?
No, he smells evil because a lot of times he doesn't react. Like later in the movie when Dracula's lost his powers, he has no reaction. So they're like, because he's not smelling evil.
Yes, that does come later.
And he can't, they're trying to find Dracula and they can't because they're not, he's not able to smell him because he's not there, basically, That's
pretty much it. There's a line of dialogue after that. So it's after we get a passage of time kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where they're going from place to place, going down to the port.
We get a cut to a year later because
that comes a bit later on.
Domini and Dracula have had a baby. There's no magic spell in this one, we have to assume it was just done the old-fashioned way.
You're right. This is during the time jump. But before we get to that, we have a scene with the Satanists.
Right.
So the Satanist is praying to his statue with his flame pit in front of him. He's saying, Lucifer, Satan, Beelzebub, why don't you answer my summons? Weren't you pleased with the bride we gave you? You took her.
Yeah.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
Why are you ignoring me? And then Satan appears, and he's big red demon, kind of like Devil Man. And he...
Actually, all the designs are lifted from Gene Colan's designs. all the characters.
Oh yeah, he does. He did look like that in the comics, didn't he?
Yeah.
The Satan. Yeah. So it doesn't look like Devilman. He looks like Satan in the comics. He's angry.
Yes.
Because they've been hoodwinked by Dracula. Dracula has stolen his bride, and he's very cranky. And he says, we're going to have to get Dracula. And the Satan's like, okay, great, we'll get Dracula.
But then he's like, wait a year. We're going to make it really bad for Dracula.
In the sub, Satan says, patience, mortal. When the time is right, we'll fix Count Dracula.
Right. Okay.
A lot of the dialogue, there's heaps of dialogue like this all the way through it. Hilarious, kind of like vernacular language being uttered by the supernatural monsters.
Yes. Yeah.
And he says, we're going to wait a year, and then he will face a terrible fate worse than death.
Yeah.
So as you say, cut to a year later.
Yep. Janus is born on Christmas, as in the comic.
Yep.
So all these details are straight out of the comic. A lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
Except for this next one, which is they haven't been able to find Dracula, and they're like... And then Quincy Harker's like, well, look at this map. You can see where all his kills have been, and they form the shape of a bat.
Okay.
Dracula's subconsciously been killing in a bat-shaped pattern.
Oh my god, that's so good. That did not come through in my version.
Okay.
In my version, it's just a bat. Yeah. And they say that Evil Detecting Dog has smelt where Dracula isn't, so that they know he's inside this area, which is in the shape of a bat. It's absolutely not lampshaded that they're looking at a bat symbol, that no one makes reference to it.
Right.
And it's just...
Oh, they talk about it in the...
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Why didn't that... Because it's just nuts. It's just Batman.
Well, it's even nutser that he would be doing it unconsciously or consciously or for any reason. Why would he make the shape of a bat?
Why would he do it from a bird's eye view?
Yeah.
The shape of a bat.
I'm gonna go for that one because that's the next point.
Well, he is in this. I guess he's flying around in the. It's a bat's eye view.
He is. Yeah.
But ridiculous. But they don't even mention it in the sub.
Right.
Sorry, the dub. He's just. They just say here. We know he's in here because the dog smelt him where he wasn't.
Okay.
I think he says that. Elijah, the dog's called Elijah. Elijah has proved his worth by telling us where Dracula isn't. I'm like, that's not how sniffer dogs work.
Yeah. No.
So that's what I mean. He smells the presence of not evil.
Right.
I guess he smells the presence of good.
Okay. So now we get a scene with Dracula and Domini where he talks about, now this is finally in the subtitles, he talks about how he loves her.
Right.
And this is actually a very interesting difference from the comics where it's like he has a son now and he's like, this people will worship this son and he will be the ruler of the damned on earth. If there's an evil edge to him, this is not. It's like he's like a dude who loves his wife and son.
Like he's playing with the baby. He's lifting the baby.
Oh yeah,
up.
we get a montage where they're like hanging out in town and enjoying walks in the park and stuff.
Well that's before Janus is born. You know, like Dracula confesses to...
Yeah, he's on a vampire and she's...
Well, he says, first of all, did this make it... Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm thrilled. I have to ask, did this make it in? Dracula tells her that he's been pretending to be Satan for a year.
I think it was.
So he says, I have a confession to make.
Yes, he definitely confessed.
I'm not Satan.
Yeah.
I'm Dracula.
Like that. Yeah.
I've been lying to you.
Yes.
I'm not actually Satan, I'm Dracula.
Yeah.
You want proof? Look over there. And he points at a mirror. And he's not in it.
Yeah.
So it's taken her a year to notice.
Yeah. I noticed that part too. She didn't... But doesn't she say, like, I knew?
She does say that.
Yeah.
She does. She says, I knew all along that
some of these things are a bit muddy because they're so similar to the comics. I'm like, was that in the comic or the movie version? But anyway, so...
She's deeply in love with him.
Yeah.
As well. There's a lot of dialogue where she talks about how much she loves him. And where he talks about how much he loves her. And also about how much he loves his son. His darling boy. He's lifting him up.
Yeah.
You know, like bouncing.
But there's nothing in the movie where it's like, oh, I want you to produce a son for me that can rule the world. It's not like that. It's like...
Yeah, you're right. In the comics, the son is just an extension of Dracula. He's always talking about the son of Dracula.
Yeah.
You know? He's still very self... Whereas this is... Did it have... When she's talking about how she fell in love with him, She's talking about him. She says he's the best husband. You're the finest man, the best man who's ever loved me. She even says, you talked to me, not at me, and cared what I had to say.
I don't know if that, but she does talk about how she hated her dad and she ran wild at some stage.
That comes a bit later.
Yeah. So at some stage here we get a confrontation where Frank finds him and kung fu's Dracula.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to that bit in Halloween H, which was the one where they do kung fu on Michael Myers. Anyway, so then we get the big fight where Anton Lepesky or whatever his name is accidentally shoots the baby through the mist.
Oh, come on! You've skipped heaps of stuff. Can we go back?
Is there
rewind
stuff
a bit?
in between? Okay.
All right, so they get the bird, they get a pigeon. A pigeon delivers
Yes,
a
that's
message.
right.
So he gets a pigeon, and it says,
"It's a message from the disciples of Satan, darling. I wonder what it could be."
Ah.
a message from the disciples of Satan, darling.
Yes.
I wonder what it could be.
Yes.
And then they open it up and says, so that's what the cult is called in the film, the disciples of Satan. And he says, it says that they've heard about the birth of Janus and they want to offer him their blessing. And when he gets the blessing, he will have the protection of Satan. He says, we should do that. We should do that, darling. It could be very useful for him. And I'm actually thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Why would you?
Why do they need that? What is a blessing? What is the blessing? What function would it have?
Well, they want to do a ritual where he gains the protection of Satan. And it's like, why would Satan protect the cuckolded son of his stolen bride?
Yes.
Is he stupid? So then they go, as you mentioned, they go to the church. Both in this, hilariously, both Dracula and Satan spend a lot of time in churches in this movie.
Surrounded by crosses, which freak him out. He's like, the crosses.
Well, they walk into the church, and Dracula says, there's no one here. Is it some kind of cruel joke? And then the shutters bang down.
Right.
And on all the shutters is a cross.
Right.
And he reacts and goes, Meanwhile, the vampire hunters have rolled up. They want to kill Dracula, but they've been following him because they want to figure out the mystery of why he's with a woman.
Yes, and a baby.
And why he's with a baby.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get in, Dracula's trying to get out, and then the leader of the cult in a mask pops up inside the barricaded church.
Yes, he had the mask. At first, I was very annoyed by that mask in the opening scene because it was very Thomas the Tank Engine. I was like, could they not afford to make this guy's lips move? Yeah. But then the mask is in the comics. He wears a mask similar to that design. They stole Gene Colan's design.
Does his voice kind of echoey?
But in the comic, when a character's lips don't move, you don't know that they're wearing a mask.
No, that's right.
So they have separate problems. The comic has a problem with the mask, and the movie has a problem.
It was very confusing, but in the dubbed version, his voice was kind of like this.
Okay.
And I assume it wasn't like that in the Japanese one.
No.
Yeah, his voice was kind of... They'd added a reverb to it, so it sounded like you could... that it was coming from further away, which was meant to imply that he was wearing a mask. But yeah, he just kind of looks like a blue Onai, like a blue demon or something, doesn't he? He was in the church already. He couldn't possibly have been there.
Yes, right. Yep.
And then, as you said, it kicks off much like in the comic.
Yeah.
The cult leader tries to shoot Dracula.
Dracula turns to mist. The silver stake goes through him and kills the baby.
Yes.
Dracula is out. He loses
berserk.
He goes berserk.
He calls the cult leader a murderer, which is a bit rich because Dracula's been murdering people for 500 years. And so he...
Well, the hypocrisy works better in the comic. Like, I think it's thought through a bit more the way he...
Yes. Yeah, everything's better in the comic.
Yeah,
this is shambles.
He's a complete mess. He's like so grieving about the death of his son. Yeah. And then he goes up to the spire and he's like yelling. This is in both the movie and the comic. He's like yelling at God and like... Yeah. And then in the movie, we get a hard cut to a New York disco and funk music again. I was like, again, this is actually kind of a good moment in the movie. Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, it's been shattered.
To me, it's just par for the course, because this movie's bonkers.
Yes.
Oh, okay, we're cutting to a disco now.
Yes.
But he goes berserk, and it's, as in the comics, he starts to tear the church down around him.
Yes.
Like Samson in the temple.
Yeah.
He pulls down the pillars, he throws them through the shutters, the steel shutters, which have the crosses on them. That's no longer an obstacle to him, because he's gone so crazy.
Yeah.
The vampire hunters take advantage of that, rush in, start fighting Dracula, and he's going crazy at fighting them too. And then Dolores asks him to stop, much as she does in the comic. She begs him to stop, and she says to them, what good will it do spilling their blood in revenge? Yeah. And I said, hey, no. It's not revenge. It's self-defense. He already took revenge.
I don't know if the revenge line is in there in the subtitles. But it's interesting because it seemed like in the issues we read, this becomes a device for Dominique to say, don't kill them. Because when Janus is born, she's like, stop. She tells Dracula, don't kill them. Our son has been born.
Yeah.
And then now this Janus is killed, and she's like, don't kill them. There's been enough killing.
There's been enough blood. I don't want my son to have any more blood.
So it's a very convenient way to stretch your comic out to 70 issues.
Yeah, effective. In this, though, she just says, she mentions revenge. Dracula's not taking revenge. He's literally defending himself because they're shooting him.
Yeah.
As you say, bafflingly cuts to New York and a lady dancing in a disco.
Yeah. And now we have the Tracy Lords moment that seems to have inspired the scene of Blade. But I saw it from the first second. This lady's dancing and a guy goes to pick her up, and I was like, oh, she's a vampire.
Oh, wow.
Immediately,
See,
I was like, oh.
You were paying attention. Whereas I was just, I wonder what nuts thing this movie's going to do
and
next.
then I was like, I bet they're going to try to make it look like the guy's a vampire. And they do that. He takes her away to a makeout spot in his convertible, and he's like, oh, I'm the vampire. Like, they hear a report on the radio about vampire attacks, and then she's like, no, it's me, and she attacks him. It's probably been done in Buffy and 100 other places too.
Yes.
I don't know.
Of course.
But it just seems so familiar to me.
You were paying attention and looking for tropes, whereas I was just, this film is full of non sequiturs. I wonder what crazy thing is going to happen next.
So now at Janus's grave,
which says rest in peace, not rest in peace.
God, they really cut some corners here. So Dominic and Gene Pelk was supposed to be kind of overseeing some of this stuff and approving or disapproving it. By the way, the sound effects, there's these constantly weird. We get constant Voltron.
Yeah,
it's like watching Voltron is what it is. They're just non-stop, pointless sound effects. These are not...
Whenever he jumps in the air, it does the Voltron sound effect.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So she's at his grave, and God himself appears and resurrects Janus and turns him into the adult angel version of Janus that we know from the comics,
and Dracula senses it from where he's hiding. He's living in a cave.
Yeah.
He hasn't seen Dolores for, I guess, a couple of weeks.
Well, in the comic, in issue 61, he's in Castle Dracula or somewhere. He's in some manor.
Right.
And he comes to look for Dominique. He's like, where is she? He's like, oh my god, she must be trying to resurrect Janus. He knows.
Ah, okay. Because she cast a spell. Whereas in this one, it's
just prays
like
to God.
A literal act of God.
Yeah.
Or it's an angel or something comes down.
Yes.
And it looks a little bit kind of like an Old Testament angel, because it's just a set of concentric kind of circles.
Yeah. But this Janus's life mission is to, and it might have been in the comics and the issues we didn't read, his mission is to kill, he's been resurrected specifically to kill Dracula.
So when Dracula knows, he knows instantly what's going on.
Yes.
Because he's attuned to this kind of thing, I guess. And he utters the most fantastic line I've ever seen, which maybe will be the episode opener for this. I don't know. But I'm not even going to try and say it. It's fantastic.
Okay. Yes.
He tries to fly in, but he's repulsed by the holy power.
Yeah.
And, Janus comes back. He merges with an angel, perhaps.
We don't know what it is.
He can turn into a golden eagle.
He can turn into a bird, yeah.
And he can shoot rays out of his eyes.
Well, maybe, but Dominique also at one stage starts shooting rays out of her hands with no explanation. She appears at hell.
There's no explanation in the film. Okay.
No.
Okay, good. Because in the sub,
they
there's no
appear.
explanation.
Satan draws them into hell at some stage.
Yes.
And we get a title card that says hell.
Okay, that was not present in.
Okay.
I
love that. We get Boston Airport, Good Santa Maria Hospital, hell.
None of those title cards are in the dub.
Well, that's why the airport thing really messed with me. Like, why are you specifying that it's Boston?
They've got an airport, and it says Boston on one of the buildings. You don't need to say it again.
I don't remember how I think Satan was like, oh, this is like it's been a year or something, and he's like, hey, he's getting his revenge on Dracula, so he strips him of his powers. Dominique shoots four beams at him.
I want to rewind it a bit. I want to talk a bit more about some of the crazy lines. This is the bit that we mentioned earlier, when she's in the cemetery. The vampire hunters witness this miracle, I suppose.
Yep.
And then they talk to her a bit.
Yes.
She tries to kill herself, and they stop her. And they say, "What are you doing?" And also, why? What's the deal? Why did you fall in love with Dracula? And that's when she tells them that he was a good man, the best husband anyone could ever have hoped for. I'm like, he's a murdering supernatural monster. He's literally killing young women every day.
Was he working at a factory and bringing home the money?
Well, they go for a year, yeah. Because she didn't leave that room, it felt like. They were going out and walking around. At one point, they were looking in a shop window.
Yes, that's right, at wedding dresses and stuff.
And they're like, hey, there's no way you didn't notice that he didn't have a reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she says, he never kept any secrets from me. It's like, yes, he did. He pretended to be Satan for a whole year.
Yeah.
That's divorceable.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Then they go back to the church. I don't know why they're in the church, but I guess he's meeting Satan. And then they're dragged into...
Hell.
So it's hell in the... As you say, there's a title card that says hell. We don't get that title card. It just seems like kind of like Nightmare Dimension.
Right, okay, yeah.
Because it doesn't look like hell. There's no fire. It's just kind of like black blobs.
Yeah.
And Dracula says, Satan, I demand to know what this is all about. And that's when Satan tells him, they talk about Janus, and Dracula says, Janus, I won't let you kill my son, who's been trying to kill him, Dracula. And Satan says, I won't kill... and he says, and also you can have me, Satan, but you can't kill Dolores, my wife. And he goes, I'll kill you because I hate you, but I have to kill Dolores because she is a threat to me. You thought Janus had inherited your power. No, he inherited her power. So she's...
I don't remember if this...
But this is all the explanation we get.
Right, I don't know if this... I don't remember if that line was in the subtitles, but at this point it was at like 6 hours for me. I was like kind of zoning out on certain bits.
Yeah. So it's never explained why she has powers, and she uses them. Satan first strips Dracula of his powers by covering him what looks like laundry detergent.
Yeah.
And then he attacks her, and she holds out her hand and repels his evil eye beams, which go back into his eyes and blind him. He staggers away and sort of complains a bit. My eyes, I can't deal with this right now. I'm sending you back. And he sends them back. And he's not a vampire anymore because he can see his reflection in the mirror. And he just promptly leaves straight away. And that's when that's when they just walk past him in the street.
Right.
The vampire hunters just walk by him in the street.
Yes, with the dog and the dog.
And they go, oh, was that Dracula?
Dracula, yes. But it's a crazy moment, yeah.
And the dog didn't react. So they say, we thought... Then they go back to Quincy and they say, we thought we saw Dracula in the street.
Well, I think they actually followed him.
They do. But first we have this scene.
Yeah.
They go, we thought we saw Dracula in the street, but the dog didn't react. And then Quincy goes, there is only one explanation for this, that he is no longer a vampire and is human again.
Yes.
Yeah, or it was just some guy. Maybe a guy dressing up as Dracula. But they said, we followed him all the way down to the train station where he boarded a non-stop train to New York City.
Right. Now, I was also like, why is New York suddenly in this? And suddenly, an hour and 12 minutes into this movie, we hear about the vampire Lilith. So Dracula's going to go to New York and try to get bit by this vampire Lilith. Yeah. In the comics, is actually his daughter.
Yes. And whom he hates. They're antagonistic, yep.
Yeah, in the comics. But in this, she emerges from the shower in her Lilith costume from the comics. I don't know why she showered and she came out to eat her date.
Yep.
That she had brought home with her. And then she's like in her full... I'm like, do you have to get geared up for that? She didn't gear up for the other guy that she ate in the car.
That's right. All right.
She's like, well, I'm not going to turn you, I hate you. And he goes off. This is where he mugs somebody in the street, steals his money, goes to a restaurant, eats a hamburger.
Yes.
There's a 1 hour supercut of the hamburger eating on YouTube.
I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's a 10-hour one. All right, come on, I have to stop you there. It's dub time.
Okay.
All right, so this same scene in the dub is hilarious. The scene with, she's not called Lilith, she's called Layla.
Okay.
Layla the vampire.
Okay. Why?
No,
That's bizarre.
Why?
I can kind of understand changing Domini because you think some dumb kids are going to get it. But Lilith? Come on.
Yeah.
People are named Lilith.
I don't know. Bizarre. Maybe they just thought it was just a little too weird for Middle America.
Yeah.
Come on. Anyway, there's a great scene. She's in the shower. There's a bit of nudity. It's not real nudity, but it's a naked back and he sticks his head in the shower where she's showering and he says, "Hey babe, I found a bottle of wine chilling in the fridge. How about I pour us a drink?" And she says, "Pour one for yourself. I do not drink."
Why?
Yes. Which I did like that.
Yeah.
I was like, there we go. And then Dracula comes in. He says, "Hey, what are you doing? You can't just come in here." Dracula backhands him. And then she comes out, again, as you said, in her costume. Why is she in costume? I guess she was just getting dressed up fancy to eat this guy in her own home. And she says, "Oh, oh, and he was Rh positive too.
Oh.
Which is another kind of funny line.
Okay,
So,
that line's not in the...
and then she says, so what brings you around after all these years and years and years and years and years? There's actually 5 years.
Wow, okay.
And then he says, I had a run-in with Satan. But same thing. She refuses to bite him. She says she hates him because he'd made her a vampire all those years ago. And then, of course, he takes off, mugs the guy, so that he can go to Restaurant King Disco Bar.
Yes.
To eat the hamburger.
I think King Disco Bar is next door to a restaurant. But anyway, he eats a hamburger. At some stage now, Janus shows up and says he's not going to kill him because he's not a vampire anymore.
Oh, yeah, and the vampire hunters are following him around, refusing to kill him.
Yeah, because he's now just a person. It's immoral for them to kill him.
And they're waiting for him to become a vampire again so they can kill him. And they actually say this in dialogue.
Okay.
It's so good.
And then I think Janus advises him to go to Transylvania. I think he's a bit like the comic version at this stage.
In this one, he just randomly announces that he has to get... When Layla turns him down, he just randomly announces, I'll go to Transylvania. There'll be vampires there that can turn me.
Okay. So he goes back to the...
How did he get there? He just had to mug a guy for money for hamburgers.
Yeah, he did. When he shows up, he's crawling. He goes to this grave with this woman named Marissa, who has the power to turn him as a vampire. But she's in her grave. Like, he has to dig her up and open her grave.
He literally digs her up.
And then she wakes up. I'm like, why was she in there alive?
Yeah, she not only was she in there, she says, you've come back for me at last. And it's revealed that she was supposed to marry him.
Right.
And that also... She knows that he was married to a human woman.
She's got the news down there.
She was in the grave.
She gets news down there. But then we get a scene very similar to the comics where all the other vampires rise from the earth and they attack him as bats. He goes to the house with the kids. It's just like that.
He goes
in, he protects the kids, he grabs the cross. The cross is burning his hand.
Why is it burning his hand? He's not a vampire at this point. So unlike in the comics, he hasn't changed back to being a vampire yet. Why is the cross burning his hand?
Yep.
There's no explanation. He shouldn't be.
Yes.
Also, there's a scene in the comic. The children offer him soup, and he knocks it out of their hands and says, I require a different kind of sustenance, or something like that. And it's implied that he's going to drink their blood. But of course, he's having his change of heart at this point, and he doesn't. He ends up protecting them. In this, he knocks it out of their hands again, but says, soup? We don't have time for that.
I think there was something, I don't remember what it said in the sub, but it was something like that.
So great. So there's no reason why the cross would be burning him.
So he goes back to Castle Dracula and he magically gets his powers back just from being there.
Yes.
Just by being in the castle.
That's it. He says, the air of the castle must have restored my vampire powers.
It's a bit like the Fury of Dracula board game now that I think about it. Where you regain hit points when you go back to Castle Dracula, but still, to fully become a vampire again, very bizarre. But then we get the castle attack.
Yep.
Well, actually, I would say, in a sense, it almost plays out a little bit better than in the comic. Because we get the scene with Quincy telling Frank and Rachel beforehand, he's like, I got this plan, I'm gonna go up there by myself. You guys have to just stay out of it. And he's like, okay, he goes, we don't know how he gets to the top of the tower.
Again.
Well, he goes up there,
I know how he gets to the top of the tower, because he's able in this. He literally just stands up and starts fighting Dracula.
Oh, yes.
And if you haven't read the comics, this is just like, why is this guy in a wheelchair just standing up?
Yeah. So, the castle, we get the huge crumbling, the castle explodes, just falls to pieces. In the comic, we get one page, beautifully drawn by Gene Colan, but it's only one page. And then suddenly, magically, the villagers know that Dracula is dead on the next page in the comic. So I actually think this played out a little bit. I mean, they knew what Marv Wolfman's plans were for issue 71 and had a bit more room to play.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
We'll never know.
But, yeah, the castle is destroyed, and then we get the scene which, the first time I read the comic was very confusing, where Janus comes to his mother, and the spirit leaves and he's transformed into a baby. I was like, what the hell is that? It wasn't until I went back and read it that I figured it out, but we get a similar scene. It's kind of the last shot of the movie before we get a bit more from the narrator in the subtitle version explaining that this was the Legend of Dracula, kind of the end kind of thing.
We get a similar thing in the dub by the sportscaster man again. The triumph of love.
Right. I don't think it was put in quite
Dracula
those
was
kind
a man.
Platitudes,
And we humans have triumphed thanks to the power of love.
Yeah, I don't think there was power love stuff in there, but I remember quite exactly.
It's not in so many words, but it's those kinds of platitudes. Harking back to the beginning where it was talking about the great conflict between good and evil and the various positive and negative emotional or moral forces.
Right.
Yep, and that's pretty much that. Then the credits ran, and I wiped my brow and thought, what did I just watch?
Yeah. So the thing about it is, it's, as I said, it follows the plot of a 70-issue comic series. It covers the main points in a plot that kind of is structured in a way that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the problem... Okay, so for me, immediately, the problem was they took Gene Colan's designs, but the loveliness of that artwork is completely stripped out of this thing. The animation is so...
It's ugly.
And bad. It's pre-Voltron-y kind of, this thing was rushed together, because you think about it, this came out in 80, last issue, they've taken plot points from issue 70, which came out in 79.
Yeah.
So this thing's been bashed together very quickly,
Yep.
and it's ugly to look at, which is the opposite of the Tomb of Dracula comic book, right off that. And then they put in all these other bits or connecting tissue that, like the hamburger eating stuff, that just is like, why is here? They've cut out stuff that would have made the plot make more sense in ways. In fact, by covering 70 issues, they've jammed too much in there.
Way too much. Way too much stuff. They need to cut out way more, but they're not, they've just put in as much as they could and then tried to make it make sense, but there's too much material, and so there's plot holes.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of plot holes that you're constantly asking, how is Dracula in a church?
Yeah.
In the comic, he's because, as you said, he's going into the cult business. He personally has had workmen strip out all the religious iconography from the church, so that he can enter it. And the only thing that's in there is a painting of Jesus that for some reason no one was able to remove, and it turns out it's because of divine providence. Fate has left that painting there.
Yeah.
In this, he's just randomly going into churches all the time. Why is he allowed in a church? I thought he couldn't go in there. And Satan too. Satan's just in this church.
Yeah.
How do
there are glowing crosses all around. He's freaking out of the crosses. I'm like, you went in there.
How does he get to Transylvania from New York?
Yeah.
How does he get there? How did he get to New York from Boston? How did he pay for his train ticket?
Yeah. Why is his hand burning when he picks up the crosses?
Yeah, that's
all
a big
that kind
one.
Of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a big shambles. It's shambling from point to point. So while the beats are there, well, I wouldn't even know if I'd call it beats. Well, plot points, plot contrivances are there. It's lurching from one to the next.
Yeah.
And what do we have for what you call connective tissue? Him eating a hamburger in Restaurant King Disco Bar?
Yeah.
That's not doing the job of weaving your story together.
No.
I mean, it's hilarious though.
No.
Look, and I guess we'll vote on whether or not.
Also, Frank's personality. To make him this weirdo mercenary guy that hey, I hate Dracula, but I'm not going to waste my time hunting him.
Yeah.
You got to pay
He knows Dracula's
and I
real,
want
too.
this girl, you got to throw the girl in? Crazy.
And he's a kung fu guy.
Yeah, and who's Dracula.
And he knows, in the dub at least, he knew about Dracula, and he says Dracula causes him a lot of trouble.
Right.
But he just...
Dracula causes him trouble? I think he has no interaction with Dracula.
No, but it's just... In the comic, obviously, Drake eventually, although he didn't believe in Dracula at first...
Well, then he kills his fiancée, and it's okay.
It's a big deal, yeah. In this, no.
Yeah.
Dracula's not caused him any trouble, and he says, we changed our names to Drake, so that we wouldn't be associated with Dracula anymore.
My God, the holy water drinking dog to me is just like,
I love that.
What a solution! What a solution!
He was raised in an evil detecting dog. He's Elijah the dog, and his eyes constantly kind of do that shing.
Yes.
I guess he's a magic dog. I mean, he basically is.
He is a magic dog. Yeah,
he was
can
fed on
detect
holy
evil.
water.
Yeah.
So he's always looking at a lot of scenes end. I mean, a lot. Like 3 or 4 scenes end with the dog looking into camera and his eye going shing, and there being a little sparkle. But here's the thing. I'm going to vote now, film yay or nay, and I'm going to say yay, and it's because it's so terrible.
Well,
if this had been an adequate Tomb of Dracula adaptation, no one would. Well, I wouldn't have had half as much fun watching it.
No, and I bet you when Blade 2025 comes out, there's going to be a lot of elements from Tomb of Dracula in it, and it's going to be no fun.
Yeah.
And I'm going to vote nay on the movie, but I think everybody should see it. Absolutely should see it, but it's not good.
Isn't that a yay, though?
I don't know, but we don't have standards.
No,
we don't have yardsticks for these kinds of
we
things.
absolutely don't. No, I'm saying yay. You have to watch this. And you got to watch the English dub. I'm sure...
Yes.
I appreciate that you watch the sub for the interest of science.
Yeah.
But, oh my God.
I agree, yeah.
The dub is hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah.
This is a great movie to watch with some mates, I imagine. If you're having if you're having a board game night or something, put Tomb of Dracula.
Probably plays pretty well on a full-size TV as well because it's a DVD rip on YouTube.
I watched it on my TV. I didn't watch it on my computer or phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was good. It was fine.
Yeah.
Although I mean the art is ugly and the animation's terrible, but I mean it's not blurry or pixelated.
Yes, it's in focus.
Yes.
Sort of.
Yes.
Okay, so
we need to take a step back to go back to the comics.
Step back to talk about the comics.
Same as last week. I like the comics.
Yeah, I like these even more. I think Gene Colan really came into full form. The heaviness of the writing didn't bother me as much this time.
Oh, good.
Somehow.
Well, I mean...
I'm not sure what it was
about it. You get a taste for it after a while. It's almost satire, I feel.
I don't know. Somehow when he turned human, it was... I don't know, but it was more palatable this time.
He could pull it off. I think Marv Wolfman could pull it off. This transformation in Dracula's kind of like worldview is believable.
I agree. And I loved his depiction of the characters. There's a line there where Frank talks about how he used to talk in cliches. And now he's like matured. I was like, yeah, you did used to talk in cliches.
Yeah.
So you kind of think, I think it was pretty good. Like the characterization and the way everything, even his love for Domini was based in evil motivations and stuff like all that kind of stuff.
Sure. It's just selfishness.
By the way, another thing, in this movie, I mentioned that at 1:12 we get the introduction of Lilith. For the first time she's mentioned. But, I mean, Torgo is not... It's like 10 minutes later. We're like 10 minutes from the end of the movie when Torgo is introduced as the new Lord of the Vampires.
I even bring him up. We didn't even mention him. He's called, incidentally, he's Tomo in the in the dub.
Yeah, okay.
Sir Tomo.
So they've saved the names because they've paid Marvel to use these names and they're using them in the sub or in the original Japanese. Okay, so adaptation. So as I said, I think this is interesting because I think it hits the points, but it's done them so badly. It's hit the points so badly. Like the cult scene where in the comic they're hanging her upside down and there's all this smoke and fire and it's just drawn so beautifully. It's so atmospheric. And you get to the movie and it's weirdly just people in robes and everything about it looks really bland and I think they just missed...
It's very goofy.
They missed the point of like half the joys of the comic, I guess.
It's like I said, it's a bad adaptation.
Yeah. As
we've discussed.
Yeah.
It shoves everything in without... And can't. I don't know if you could have all of these details and tell a good story.
Yeah.
Because... It's in fast forward. Everyone's just sprinting around.
Yeah.
There's no explanation for why people are doing things.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. So it's not, even though you can pause the film and say this is the scene that corresponds to this issue of the comic, that doesn't make it a good adaptation.
Yeah.
But it does make it a good movie.
Okay. Okay, so shall we move on, I think? To our plugs. So please like, subscribe, rate, and review on your platform of choice. Please visit our Patreon, which has almost no rewards except for shout-outs. Which is patreon.com/comicbookmovieoblivion, all one word. We got a letter from somebody that pointed out that Discord was a thing I could not remember last week.
Yes, it was Discord.
Yes, we don't have Discord, we don't have Twitch, we've got Facebook.
We've got Facebook and that's it.
That's it.
Kumar will occasionally tweet at Kumar Prime.
I'm almost not even... I don't even think I tweeted last week's episode on there. Yes, but I am on Twitter. We can be reached. Write us letters at least.
Please
We'd like to get them.
And as Kumar said, check out the Facebook page where we will post the links to this film on YouTube.
Yeah. I'll put them in the show notes for this one anyway.
And I will post Janus's tombstone.
Okay.
Rest in PA.
Yeah. Okay, next week, September 13th, 1983, 40 years ago, was the first chapter of Fist of the North Star. So, in celebration of the 40th anniversary of Fist of the North Star, we're going to be covering the direct-to-video...
Another direct-to-video.
Maybe it was released in some territory... in a cinema somewhere. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Possibly.
There's some all-stars in it, which I'm looking forward to. But it's from 1994. I think the whole thing's on YouTube in probably pretty bad form. And we'll probably read a couple of volumes of it.
We did do this for Deconstructing Comics.
I don't know how many volumes you read. Yeah,
but I'm looking forward to doing it again.
I think more volumes have come out since we reviewed it, so we might have some more. I don't know how much we can read in a week, but that'll be it.